Feel the quiet tug inside your chest, the place where you make promises to yourself before the world speaks, the place that knows when you are drifting and when you are anchored. If you listen closely, you can hear your breath drawing a small circle of safety around your body, shoulders softening, jaw unclenching, eyes warming to the room you are in. That space is sacred because it is honest, and honesty is where wisdom begins. Many of us arrive here carrying secret weights, the fear of choosing wrong, the fatigue of being responsible for too much, the ache of wanting prosperity without losing ourselves. I see that weight, and I will not shame it. You do not need a lecture. You need a lantern and a hand that says, "Walk with me while it is still dark." There is a reason the story of King Solomon finds us in moments like this. His life is not a myth wrapped in gold. It is the pulse of a human heart under a heavy crown. He knew the noise of applause and the loneliness of decision, the scent of cedar and incense, and the subtle, almost inaudible cracks that appear when a soul grows quiet where it should be awake. Solomon's story is not only about a temple or a throne, it is about a listening heart, a calibrated mind, and a spirit that remembers who the true king is. When we bring our lives into his story, we are not dressing our problems in ancient clothes. We are letting an ancient light fall on modern questions, revealing shapes we could not see before. Wisdom, as Solomon lived it at his best, is not a trophy on a shelf. It is a way of perceiving that integrates reverence with reality. Neuroscience gives us a helpful window into why this matters. Under stress, your amygdala narrows the field, your body floods with urgency, and the prefrontal cortex, the part of you that plans, weighs, and chooses, can dim just when you need it most. Practical spirituality slows the breath, widens the field, and invites God into the moment so that cognition and conscience stand side by side. When you breathe with intention and pray with honesty, your nervous system downshifts, your attention steadies, and your values return to the table. This is not theory, it is a daily mercy. Wisdom is what happens when your spirit, your mind, and your body tell the truth together. You may feel caught between two worlds, the life others applaud and the life your soul can carry. The applause promises warmth, yet often leaves you cold after the lights fade. The soul asks for truth, and truth sometimes asks for slower steps, cleaner motives, and uncomfortable clarity. Many people try to outrun that tension with more noise, more speed, more proof. Yet the heart does not heal by acceleration, it heals by alignment. Alignment begins with listening, listening to God, listening to conscience, listening to the quiet needs of those affected by your choices. This is why Solomon's request for an understanding heart is not naive, it is courageous. He asked not for a larger stage, but for a deeper center. As you breathe, notice the places in your life where decisions have stacked like stones, each one small, but together forming a wall that blocks the sun. Maybe you feel the pressure to be impressive, to keep expanding, to match someone else's pace. Maybe you fear that if you slow down, you will lose what you have built. The nervous system calls this hypervigilance. The soul calls it restlessness. Scripture calls it a divided heart. A divided heart is efficient in the short term and exhausted in the long term. Integration, the marriage of purpose and practice, takes longer at the start and pays back peace for years. Strategic repetition helps here. Breathe, listen, choose. Breathe, listen, choose. Breathe, listen, choose. Each cycle lowers the volume of panic and raises the signal of wisdom. The true story of King Solomon meets you exactly where you are, ambitious yet wary, grateful yet unsettled, capable yet aware of how fragile greatness can be. You do not need to abandon desire, you need to refine it. You do not need to reject prosperity, you need to harness it to purpose. You do not need to fear authority, you need to submit it to a higher one. Solomon's journey will show how calling is clarified in conflict, how discernment precedes growth, how excellence can be worship rather than vanity, how small compromises can hollow a strong life, and how enduring wisdom outlives even our failures. None of this is a demand, all of it is an invitation. So come closer to the story with your whole self. Bring your questions, because questions are doors doors, and wisdom is patient with doors. Bring your scars, because scars are evidence that healing does not erase history, it redeems it. Bring your hopes, because hopes are fuel when anchored to reverence. As we walk with Solomon, we will not rush past the parts that sting, and we will not sensationalize the parts that shine. We will look steadily, breathe steadily, and let the ancient words do their precise work in a modern nervous system. This is how wisdom enters. Softly at first, then surely, then strongly enough to carry a crown without losing a soul. Before we turn the page, rest your attention on this simple practice that prepares the mind to receive. Inhale slowly through the nose, counting to 4, feeling the ribs widen and the belly soften. Hold gently for 2 as you say in your heart, "Give me a listening heart." Exhale to 6, letting the shoulders descend and the jaw release. Repeat 3 times. The body settles, the mind clears, the spirit remembers. You are not behind, you are not disqualified. You are at the threshold of a truer story. And as the light rises on Solomon's life, may a quiet light rise in you too, the kind that does not need to announce itself to be real. Power rarely arrives with calm hands. It comes breathing fast, trailing whispers, stirring old loyalties and private fears. In the corridors outside the throne room, sandals scuff the stone, and eyes measure distance like tape. Who stands near? Who looks away? Who might move first? Before crowns are placed, hearts are weighed in rooms where only a few dare to speak. Core, the turbulent path from David to Solomon, Adonijah's bid for the throne, the role of Bathsheba and Nathan, the early tests of legitimacy. History is not a straight corridor. It bends at the point where courage enters. When Bathsheba remembers a promise and Nathan names the risk, destiny stops being an idea and becomes a door with trembling hinges. These opening beats carry more than palace politics. They echo the ache many feel in quieter lives. Hidden pains addressed. Anxiety about legitimacy, fear of being overlooked, family politics poisoning purpose. The body knows this ache, the tightness behind the breastbone, when someone else moves ahead of you by charm or lineage. The dryness in the mouth when you enter rooms where your name is not yet trusted. The fatigue that gathers when love has to thread its way through old rivalries. In those moments, the nervous system sharpens the world to edges and shadows. Yet inside the pressure, another voice begins to rise. Not loud, not frantic, but steady, reminding you that legitimacy is not a favor from the crowd. It is a calling proved in how you carry light through a narrow place. The script most of us inherit says that if you are chosen, the path will part like water. Distorted concept exposed. If I'm chosen, doors will open automatically. Reality, calling is confirmed in conflict. The heart wants frictionless proof. The soul knows better. In the brain's language, novelty and threat spike attention, but meaning is forged in ambiguity, when you cannot see around the corner and still choose integrity. Solomon's earliest days are not a coronation parade. They are a test of center. Will he match haste with haste, or let counsel and process braid strength into his first moves? The ancient story is gentle with us here. It does not shame our longing to be seen. It simply warns that visibility without substance makes a hollow sound. Expectation breaker. Solomon's rise wasn't smooth. Wisdom often begins in a storm, not a library. Storms reorder priorities. You learn which names you dial first, which scriptures steady the hands, which elders clear the fog in your thinking. Under stress, adrenaline pushes speed, wisdom invites sequence. First truth, then timing, first process, then proclamation, first listening, then leverage. There is a quiet alchemy in this order. As cortisol ebbs and breath deepens, the prefrontal mind returns to the table with its quiet instruments, weighing, considering, integrating. What looks like slowness from the outside is actually alignment from within, and alignment is what keeps authority from becoming appetite. Inside the palace, restraint becomes the surprising signal. Solomon does not begin his reign by feeding grudges. He begins it by placing boundaries around vengeance. Mercy does not erase justice, it clarifies it. Strength shows itself not by how loudly it punishes, but by how precisely it restores what fear tried to scatter. This is the sober magic of beginnings handled well, an authority that refuses spectacle in favor of substance. People breathe differently when leadership chooses restraint. Their shoulders lower, their voices soften, their hope returns a little at a time. You can feel the collective nervous system step down from high alert, as if saying, "We might be safe here." Modern application. Leadership requires honoring rightful process, wise counsel, and calm under pressure. These are not slogans. They are textures you can feel in a room, the way agendas are shared before decisions, the way dissent is welcomed without humiliation, the way timelines bend to truth rather than truth bending to timelines. In the body, calm under pressure is not numbness, it is coherence. Heart rhythms steady, breath lengthens, and thought, emotion and conviction move in the same direction. In the spirit, calm is not passivity, it is trust that order will hold if you hold to the one who orders. In such an atmosphere, people do not have to grasp for control. They find their place and do their work. Family politics often leave a bruise that words cannot quite touch, and the bruise reacts long after the blow. The old patterns reappear, proving, pleasing, comparing, each a small drain in the foundation. Solomon's threshold reminds us that foundations do not keep strong by accident. They keep strong by the slow devotion to what is right, even when no one is clapping. In that slow devotion, dignity grows roots. When counsel is honored, process is kept, and the temperature of a room is lowered by honesty, legitimacy stops being a contest and becomes a quiet recognition that settles on a life like morning light. There is a beauty in roles clearly lived. Nathan carries truth. Bathsheba carries promise. David carries authority that still listens. Solomon carries the weight of becoming. Each role, held cleanly, allows the whole to move without tearing. When any role reaches for more than it was given, the fabric strains. When each role gives what it must and no more, the fabric strengthens. The soul knows this pattern because it is written into creation itself. Order as worship, restraint as reverence, unity as a gift that arrives after humility does its patient work. In such order, power does not puff, it serves. The crown, when it finally rests, is not simply metal and gems. It is memory. It remembers the corridor of conflict, the names that risked reputation to keep a promise alive, the days when silence felt like safety and speaking felt like obedience. It remembers that legitimacy came through a door marked pressure, not popularity. It remembers that a voice above the court still rules the court. The crown remembers, and by remembering, it teaches. Authority that forgets its origins tends to turn inward. Authority that remembers tends to turn outward and heal. Symbolic metaphor, the anointing is a seal, not a shortcut. Oil is not permission to skip the line. It is a mark that you will keep the line true. It does not remove the need for counsel. It deepens it. It does not erase enemies. It refines responses. It does not guarantee applause. It guarantees scrutiny and invites a steadier love. When anointing is treated as a seal, the soul becomes less frantic about proving and more faithful about stewarding. When it is treated as a shortcut, the soul becomes brittle, always measuring, always comparing, always justifying the very haste that empties meaning out of achievement. So the chapter closes not with triumphal noise, but with a quieter confidence that feels like clean air after rain. The contested succession becomes the chosen son, not because the loudest claim won, but because truth, counsel and process stood their ground while fear tried to hurry the ending. If your own life carries a similar hinge, rooms where you feel unproven, spaces where rivalries still hum under the floorboards, let this beginning soothe the nervous system and steady the will. Endings may be written with trumpets, but beginnings are carved with patience. And when the door opens to the next step, carry this line with you like a warm stone in the hand. Calling is confirmed in conflict, and the seal you carry is strong enough to outlast the storm that revealed it. Night carries a sound that daylight often drowns, the soft hum of the heart when it is honest. In Gibeon, the air is thin with desert coolness. The camp quiet, the young king turning on his mat with the weight of a nation on his chest. Sleep loosens the knots without untying them. Questions drift like slow embers. What kind of king will I be? What kind of man must I become to hold what is coming? The world waits for spectacle. The soul waits for sense. Core, Solomon's defining request, an understanding heart to govern, the famous judgment between two mothers. In that liminal space between exhaustion and grace, a conversation opens that does not flatter, does not rush, and does not bargain. It invites truth. It invites the kind of choosing that shapes a lifetime. Hidden pains addressed, decision fatigue, fear of choosing wrong, the burden of responsibility. These are not abstract ideas. They are felt realities. Decision fatigue has a taste, the metallic edge at the back of the tongue, when choices stack faster than meaning. Fear of choosing wrong has a posture, shoulders forward, breath shallow, eyes scanning for rescue. The burden of responsibility has a heartbeat, fast when the room is loud, irregular when familiar strategies stop working. The brain narrows its field under threat, amplifies urgency, and whispers the oldest lie: move first, think later. Yet the deeper self knows that hurry is a poor substitute for clarity. What the story offers here is not a trick to silence the noise, but a way to hear through it. Distorted concept exposed. Wisdom is accumulated information. Reality. Wisdom is applied discernment under reverence. Wisdom, in Solomon's world and in ours, is not measured by the bulk of books or the brightness of memory. It is the art of alignment, values, vision, and voice moving together under a higher presence. Neuroscience names part of this alignment. When the body settles, the prefrontal mind regains range. The anterior cingulate reopens attention to conflict without panic, and the ventromedial regions weigh value with context. Reverence adds what measurement cannot. A posture that receives reality as gift and responsibility, not merely as problem and prize. Under reverence, knowledge becomes counsel, and counsel becomes care. Expectation breaker. God offered a blank check. Solomon asked for listening. The gift was governance, then greatness. The order matters. Listening before leverage, discernment before display, governance before glory. A listening heart is not a passive organ. It is active perception, hearing motives beneath claims, pain beneath anger, truth beneath noise. In the story that follows, two women stand in a room with one child and a single terrible question: whose life is this? Words tangle, grief rises, the court holds its breath. What happens next has been retold for centuries as proof of brilliance, but the deeper miracle is moral vision. Solomon names a test that does not humiliate, does not toy with grief, and cannot be faked. The real mother's love moves toward loss rather than risk the child's harm, and wisdom recognizes life by the way love protects it. The mind can process facts with speed. The heart recognizes value with depth. In disputes that demand speed, cleverness searches for advantage. Wisdom searches for the life at stake. The two mothers' judgment is a window into that difference. It shows how discernment attends to the human core rather than the outer theater, how truth can be revealed by a choice that only love would make. The room shifts from argument to recognition in a single breath, because recognition is what truth feels like when it finally arrives. Relief that does not gloat, justice that does not strut, resolution that honors the vulnerable. Modern life dresses the same drama in new clothes: boardrooms, hospital corridors, classrooms, living rooms. Each becomes a chamber where conflicting claims ask for more than cleverness. In such rooms, outcomes may glitter, but motives carry the soul. Plans built on appearances strain. Decisions anchored in underlying motives hold. The nervous system senses the difference. When motives are clean, the body loosens even under pressure. When motives are cloudy, muscles brace even when applause is loud. The story's wisdom travels well because it touches this precise seam between cognition and conscience, between what works and what heals. Modern application: pray, plan for discernment before scale, judge by underlying motives, not surface claims. Said another way, the order of the inner life decides the order of outcomes. Growth that outruns discernment becomes fragile. Influence that outruns integrity becomes extraction. Success that outruns worship becomes weight without oxygen. A listening heart changes the physics of power, bending it away from self and toward service. This does not make decisions easy, it makes them true. And truth, even when costly, is lighter to carry over time than the elaborate camouflage of expedience. Symbolic metaphor: before you multiply, calibrate. Multiplication without calibration is like building faster on a misaligned foundation. Beautiful for a season, then suddenly brittle. Calibration looks quiet from the outside. Slower meetings, thicker silence, questions that seem to delay momentum. Inside, it is the precise work of bringing compass and map into agreement. In the body, this looks like steadier breath, smoother heart rhythms, and a felt sense of coherence. In the spirit, it sounds like a yes that does not fight itself. In the mind, it reads as a hierarchy of values that does not wobble when new variables enter the scene. Gibeon is, in this sense, more than geography. It is an inner landscape many recognize. It is the place where gifts and gaps are named without shame, where desire is refined rather than denied, where the next step is chosen not because it dazzles, but because it rings true. The blank check remains a powerful image, not because it offers fantasy, but because it reveals character. The heart that asks for listening is the heart that can be trusted with abundance. The heart that asks for domination is already unsafe with a little and dangerous with a lot. Governance, then greatness. This is not piety for its own sake. It is protection for everyone who will live under the decisions made at the top. The judgment between the mothers closes with awe, not because a trick was performed, but because a soul was protected. Awe, in scripture and in the nervous system, widens the field. Pupils settle, breath evens, time feels less like a hallway of locked doors and more like a garden with paths. Awe tells the body and the community that reality is larger and kinder than fear allowed. That is why stories like this are kept and retold. They teach the hands how to hold power without squeezing, the eyes how to read pain without exploiting it, the tongue how to speak verdicts that do not fracture the future. Gibeon's night becomes a template, and templates shape reflex. When the next conflict rises, the heart remembers the order that heals. Listen first, then weigh. Honor life, then rule. Choose reverence, then reach for result. The story does not promise ease. It promises alignment, and alignment has a quiet strength that withstands spectacle. In that strength, the crown serves the people rather than borrowing their breath to inflate its shine. The listening heart continues to govern long after the scene has ended, because wisdom once chosen continues choosing. And the night that began with a restless king closes with a settled soul, prepared not only to make decisions, but to become a shelter within them. Prosperity has a temperature, a scent, a sound. It feels like warm air moving through wide courtyards, smells of resin and incense, and hums with the rhythm of coordinated hands turning chaos into order. In Solomon's day, cedar from Lebanon arrived like rivers of fragrance. Stone met stone with a confidence that only careful planning can give, and songs rose from a people who sensed they were living inside a promised moment. The city itself seemed to breathe more slowly, as if sheltering a secret. Greatness is not noise, it is alignment made visible. Core, building the temple, international alliances, proverbs and songs, Queen of Sheba's visit, national flourishing. The temple rose not as a monument to a man, but as a house for the name. Timbers fitted, gold leaf catching morning light, skilled artisans moving in patterns that honored both craft and presence. In that order, the heart found room to exhale. Success is not only celebration, it is scrutiny from within. Hidden pains addressed, success anxiety, imposter syndrome amid prosperity, fear of spiritual drift in abundance. Many know the odd loneliness that comes with achievement, the brief shiver after applause, the private question that creeps into the back of the throat, can I carry this without cracking? The body records both gain and grief. Even in triumph, muscles can brace, sleep can thin, joy can feel like a borrowed coat. Neuroscience helps us name this tension. Novelty and reward light up the brain's circuits, but without rooted values, the same circuits chase more with less satisfaction. The soul names the same reality another way. Abundance without anchoring becomes drift. And drift, even when draped in gold, still feels like loss. Distorted concept exposed. Prosperity proves character. Reality. Prosperity amplifies character. Wealth is a mirror, not a medal. It does not grant virtue. It magnifies what is already in motion. A generous heart becomes a river that finds new channels. A fearful heart builds dams and calls them strategy. When Queen of Sheba arrives, she is astonished not merely by treasures, but by arrangement, the seating of officials, the cadence of service, the coherence of worship. Excellence here is not vanity. It is testimony. Systems that dignify people and center God become their own kind of witness, quietly persuasive, impossible to fake for long. Expectation breaker. The temple was the summit of worship, not a monument to ego. That sentence realigns the whole scene. A monument to ego would have demanded more glare and less prayer, more spectacle and less reverence. Instead, the structure breathes like a living liturgy. Courts and chambers arranged with purpose, music and sacrifice, drawing attention away from personalities and toward presence. The nervous system recognizes this difference. Where ego rules, the air feels thin and urgent, as if everyone is holding their breath. Where worship centers, the atmosphere steadies, time widens, and the community's collective pulse finds a humane rhythm. There is an invisible architecture beneath the visible one. Proverbs and songs are part of it. Language that trains the heart to see patterns, to love wisdom for its own beauty, to resist the small shortcuts that hollow a strong life. These words do not flatter, they form. They move through homes and marketplaces, shaping reflexes, reminding leaders and laborers alike that truth without kindness becomes brittle, and kindness without truth becomes shapeless. In this season, poetry and policy hold hands, and the result is peace that feels earned rather than lucky. Modern application: build systems that serve purpose. Let worship anchor wealth, not the reverse. In practice, that looks and feels like environments where people are not squeezed to inflate an image, where calendars leave space for rest that is not apologetic, where counsel is sought before spectacle is scheduled. The spiritual life and the nervous system agree on this. Coherence is health. Where purpose sets the frame, resources take their rightful place as servants. Where resources lead, humans bend into shapes that do not fit them for long. The cost shows up later. In morale, in trust, in the quiet erosion of meaning. Applause, handled well, becomes gratitude rather than addiction. Gratitude keeps memory clean. We remember the deserts we crossed, the hands that steadied us, the nights when we asked for an understanding heart and received enough light for the next step only. Addiction to applause, by contrast, narrows vision, demands larger and louder signs to feel the same relief, and confuses acclaim with anointing. The brain's reward pathways adapt quickly. What thrilled last year barely registers today. Worship interrupts that spiral, returning the soul to its true center, teaching desire to kneel before it runs. International alliances widened Israel's reach, yet the story's deeper emphasis is not expansion for its own sake. It is order in service of presence. The court's beauty lies in its intelligible design, roles clear, cadence humane, counsel proximate to power. Order does not mean rigidity. It means fidelity, form shaped by purpose, purpose shaped by reverence. In such conditions, prosperity feels less like a flood and more like a managed river, turning mills, watering fields, carrying boats that do not sink their owners' hearts. Symbolic metaphor: a crown must bow to a throne. The image is simple and saving. When the crown forgets the throne, it grows heavy, demanding constant bracing from the neck beneath it. When the crown bows, weight redistributes, Leadership becomes stewardship, and stewardship becomes joy. Bowing is not weakness. It is precision, aligning the visible with the invisible, the immediate with the eternal. In that alignment, abundance loses its power to seduce and gains its power to serve. And a people, seeing that posture in their king, learn to carry their own smaller crowns the same way. Grateful, grounded, and free. Cracks rarely announce themselves with thunder. They appear as hairlines. The eye almost forgives. A silence here, an exception there, a small bargain that feels harmless because it is quiet. In Solomon's bright noon, the corridors still smelled of incense, the ledgers still balanced, the song still rose, and yet a softer sound began to move beneath the music, the faint creak of weight shifting off center, core, foreign entanglements, many marriages, imported horses, mounting taxation, slipping heart, and divided loyalties. At first glance, these look like strategies of stability, signatures of a wise reign extending its reach. Look closer, and you can feel the nervous system lean forward, alert, but unsure why, sensing that good logic can still be wrong for the soul when the center slides by degrees. Hidden pains addressed, the slow erosion of convictions, rationalizing small compromises, workaholism and extraction. Erosion has a texture. It feels like being busy beyond meaning, like convincing yourself this is temporary while your calendar forgets your own name. Like waking from shallow sleep with the taste of copper and the thought that you are responsible for keeping everyone impressed. The brain cooperates with erosion when rewards arrive on schedule. Dopamine marks the path even if the destination dulls. The heart resists, then tires, then finally grows quiet in ways that look like professionalism from the outside and feel like numbness on the inside. A life can be meticulously managed and quietly misplaced at the same time. Distorted concept exposed. Strategic compromise is harmless. Reality, tolerated fractures become fault lines. The phrase strategic compromise sounds clever in rooms that prize outcomes, but wisdom hears the hollowness behind the tone. Some compromises save lives, others sell centers. The test is not whether the ledger smiles. The test is whether the soul can still tell the truth without flinching. Tolerated fractures become fault lines because repetition teaches the body and the boardroom the same lesson. This is acceptable. This is how we do things. This is the price of greatness. 1 year later, the exception is policy, and 3 years later, policy feels like destiny. Expectation breaker. The wisest man could still be seduced by unexamined success. Seduction does not always arrive in silk and song. It arrives in perfectly reasonable memos and metrics that flatter fatigue. Unexamined success whispers that the results justify the drift, that the machine must be fed, that the glow on the metal means the heat is healthy. Solomon's horses were not just animals. They were symbols of imported security, signals that trust had shifted from presence to horsepower. Many marriages were not only romances or alliances, they were threads weaving foreign altars into the fabric of a worshipping people. Taxes were not only numbers, they were weight settling on the backs of those who once sang freely. Success, unexamined, can sanctify its own appetite. The body knows when appetite has taken the wheel. Breath shortens even in victory. Shoulders stay lifted even in safety. Sleep restores less than it used to. The spirit knows as well. Prayer thins to form. Gratitude turns technical. Worship becomes an event that must be managed rather than a presence that must be honored. What once felt like overflow begins to feel like obligation. What once felt like calling begins to feel like maintenance. The crown that once sat lightly starts to demand bracing from the neck beneath it. Modern application. Define non-negotiables. Audit loyalties, steward power without oppression. These are not slogans for a wall. They are the ligaments of a life that wants to keep moving without tearing. Non-negotiables hold shape when applause tempts revision. Loyalties, when audited with honesty, reveal where love has been traded for leverage. Power, stewarded gently, refuses to fund image with other people's breath. In the nervous system, this looks like coherence returning, heart rhythms smoothing, attention widening, decisions feeling heavy in the right way and light in the right place. In the soul, this reads as reverence re-entering the room. Awe returns, not as spectacle but as alignment. Imported horses have modern cousins. They are the shortcuts that promise speed without asking whether the road can bear it. The partnerships that look brilliant on paper but smuggle altars you never meant to build. The relentless expansions that demand more tribute than truth. The mind can justify almost anything with enough data. Wisdom insists on asking whether the means are reshaping the ends, whether the tools are carving the user, whether the next victory will require a smaller self than the last one did. When the answer keeps shrinking you, the crack is no longer hairline. Workaholism dresses itself as devotion, and extraction pretends to be excellence. The difference is not in how much is produced, but in what is produced inside the people doing the producing. Where extraction rules, eyes grow dim behind brave smiles. Where excellence serves, faces brighten even under strain because the work aligns with meaning. Solomon's court shows both possibilities. Order can be worship or theater. Growth can be stewardship or hunger. The same cedar, the same gold, the same ledgers can participate in holiness or hollowness, depending on who is bowing to whom. There is mercy in early warnings. A question catches in the throat during a lavish banquet. A quiet worker's eyes tell a truer story than the month-end report. A prayer that used to flow now sticks at the first word. These are not inconveniences. They are alarms calibrated for the soul's safety. If honored, they can close the crack before it becomes a canyon. If ignored, they teach the crack to become a habit. And habits, once formed at the level of identity, turn kingdoms, outer and inner, into engines that no longer care what they crush. Symbolic metaphor. One grain can unbalance a scale over time. It is a humble image, almost gentle, and that is the point. Not a boulder, not a shove. One grain, again and again. The hand that adds it tells a story each day. Tomorrow I will remove it. Tomorrow I will reset the measure. Tomorrow I will rest. Tomorrow arrives and the hand returns with another grain. Over time the scale leans, then lists, then locks into a tilt that feels like truth only because it has been practiced so long. Wisdom interrupts the rhythm not with drama but with remembrance. Who we are, whose we are, why any of this mattered in the first place. Solomon's golden zenith did not collapse in a single storm. It surrendered by degrees through respectable decisions that slowly moved worship from the center to the side. The heavy yoke people felt was not just taxation, it was the weight of a system serving its shine more than their souls. The lesson is not a scold, it is an invitation to tenderness with our own thresholds. If your life is strong and shining right now, do not fear the strength. Honor the shine by guarding the center. If your life is fraying at the edges, do not fear the fray. Trace it back to the first small grain and let truth gently and steadily begin to tilt the scale home. Silence after celebration has a peculiar echo. It is not empty. It is full of what remains when music recedes. Choices, consequences, and the quiet math of a life tallied in more than gold. In the late days of Solomon's reign, that echo gathered into a weather of its own. Prophets' words that once sounded distant began to ring close, like thunder you feel in your ribs before you hear it in your ears. Core, prophetic warning. Jeroboam, the divided kingdom after Solomon, the enduring witness of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. The narrative turns with a torn cloak, 10 pieces in a stranger's hands. Lines harden, loyalties split, and the bright map of a united people gains a seam that will not close. History names kings and campaigns. The soul remembers a simpler truth. When the center slides, the edges cannot hold each other for long. Hidden pains addressed. Fear that failure cancels legacy. Regret over past seasons. These fears have a temperature and a weight. They feel like the hot flush across the face when memory surfaces uninvited, like the heaviness in the throat when a private sentence begins with "if only." Regret is not only cognitive, it is visceral. Muscles coil around what cannot be redone. Breath shortens around scenes that will not be reshot. Yet even here, mercy does a discreet kind of work. It does not deny loss. it reframes it. The nervous system seeks safety, the spirit seeks meaning. Wisdom brings them to the same table and speaks softly until both can hear. Failure is a chapter, not a book. Grief is a witness, not a warden. Distorted concept exposed. A bad ending ruins everything. Reality. God redeems through the wisdom preserved. Endings matter, but they are not judges with final gavel in hand. They are teachers with letters still to write. The fracture of the kingdom is real, and Scripture refuses to edit the pain out of the record. Yet alongside the split stands another story. Words gathered and guarded, sayings honed on the whetstone of long observation, songs that sanctify desire, a preacher's voice that tells the truth about vapor and time. These writings do not excuse Solomon. They outlive him. They are not polish on a tarnished crown. They are medicine for the generations who follow, including the ones who read these lines with their own divided histories, humming under the skin. Expectation breaker. The kingdom split, yet the wisdom literature continues to heal generations. This confounds the reflex to dismiss a life because it stumbled where it should have stood. Healing often arrives in forms that do not flatter our desire for neat narratives. A proverb steadies a teenager who has never seen a palace. A passage in Ecclesiastes loosens the grip of a midlife hurry that mistakes breadth for depth. A line in the Song of Songs returns dignity to a love grown timid under the glare of performance. These texts move like water through stone, slow, persistent, shaping the inner landscape long after the loudest headlines fade. The body recognizes this healing even when the mind does not yet name it. Reading a single true sentence can slow the heart's tempo, the way shade cools a sun-struck path. Naming vanity as vanity can lower the inflation in a life stretched thin by proving. Singing desire as covenant can return warmth to a chest tightened by transactional living. Neuroscience observes shifts in attention and affect. The spirit calls it consolation. Either way, the effect is the same. Coherence where there was scatter, tenderness where there was hardness. A sturdier center where drift once dictated direction. Modern application. Let hard lessons shape a legacy of counsel. Pass on wisdom, not just wealth. The ledger of a life is not balanced only in assets transferred, but in patterns taught. How to handle praise without losing the thread, how to handle power without thinning the soul, how to handle loss without rewriting the story into bitterness. Counsel does not erase the past. It fertilizes the future, turning compost of sorrow into soil that can grow sturdier fruit. In families, teams, and nations, this looks like stories told with truth intact and shame absent, practices handed down that keep worship at the center of work, and decisions calibrated by values that outlast trends. There is tenderness in acknowledging that some doors do close. Not every relationship mends, not every structure holds, not every consequence can be undone, and yet, within that tenderness lives a clarity that sets the face forward. What remains is still enough for goodness. Proverbs offers daily tools, small and repeatable, for walking straight in crooked streets. Ecclesiastes grants permission to name the mist, to hold success lightly, to find joy in bread, work, and sunlight without demanding that they bear the weight of eternity. Song of Songs restores the language of delight, telling a world addicted to conquest that the highest power is faithful love. These are not decorations on a broken wall. They are foundations for a wiser house. The figure of Jeroboam reminds us that fracture breeds imitation as much as reform. Idols can be cast in the name of convenience, altars erected to save a commute, expedients dressed in concern for the people. The danger is not only in the wrong object of worship, it is in the wrong idea of worship itself. When worship becomes a technique for social control, the soul senses the counterfeit and grows either cynical or superstitious. The path back is neither denial nor despair. It is reverence that refuses to perform and refuses to manipulate, choosing instead to bow where truth is alive and mercy is real. Symbolic metaphor. When the palace cracks, the scrolls still speak. The image is simple and strong. Architecture falls, language endures, thrones pass, counsel remains. The crack does not silence the text, It amplifies it because need sharpens hearing. In your own story, the cracked place may be the exact acoustics through which wisdom finally reaches the deepest room. Not because pain is holy in itself, but because humility makes a better sanctuary than pride ever did. And humility, once received, turns even the memory of failure into a doorway others can walk through without fear. So the arc bends toward a sober mercy. Solomon's life does not end in triumphal light. It sets with the truth still visible on the horizon. A divided kingdom walks into its future with a library in its hands. That library continues to do what crowns cannot: teach children and elders, rulers and workers, lovers and loners, how to become human in the presence of God. If your heart carries a scene you wish you could rewrite, let this chapter ease the throat and widen the lungs. The last page of a season is not the last word over a life. The scrolls still speak, and in their speaking the future finds its better center. Imagine a quiet corridor at dawn, stone cool beneath bare feet, 3 doors standing in a row, with their names carved like vows: wealth, wisdom, worship. Each door listens. Each door remembers the last hands that turned its handle. Most people drift to the first door because it glitters in low light, promising relief before reflection, comfort before coherence, applause before understanding. The corridor is patient, yet the choice made here shapes the rooms that follow. Wealth first opens to a hall of mirrors, wide, bright, full of angles that flatter and fragment. In those mirrors, the nervous system hums with constant appraisal, scanning for proof, measuring for safety, adjusting the self to fit the latest reflection. It works for a while, until the muscles tire from carrying image over essence and the heart begins to ask questions that the mirrors cannot answer. The second door, wisdom, does not glitter. It glows. The wood is worn by the touch of those who asked for deeper sight, by the hesitation of those who arrived uncertain and left steady. Behind it, the room is spacious without being empty. Windows face the inner weather and the outer world at once. Words live here, true words, patient words, like chairs that hold the weight of a life without creaking. The body responds differently in this light. Breath lengthens, shoulders lower, vision widens. The prefrontal mind, quieted by reverence, regains its range and begins to integrate what panic scattered. In this room, desire is not scolded. It is refined. Ambition is not erased. It is oriented. Power is not worshipped. It is harnessed to serve. The third door, worship, is less a door than a threshold. Stepping through it feels like stepping into original gravity. Names cease to compete and kneel instead. Timelines loosen. The soul recognizes home. Here, identity does not wobble under applause or shrink under silence. It rests in a presence that is not fragile and not for sale. The nervous system calls this regulation. The spirit calls it awe. Both tell the same truth from different angles. A centered life carries weight without strain and releases beauty without calculation. In this room, gratitude becomes fluent, conscience feels clean, and purpose stops asking for attention because it is busy giving itself away. The order of the doors matters. Wealth before wisdom makes worship an accessory, a seasonal flourish draped over appetite. Wealth before worship trains the hands to grip and the jaw to set. It sharpens alertness, but narrows love. Even when a person eventually finds the other doors, the hallway back feels long, and the currency spent feels more like self than like coin. Wisdom before worship, by contrast, becomes a path where each step prepares the next. Wisdom opens perception so that worship is not performance, but surrender, not strategy, but truth. And in that sequence, wisdom, then worship. Wealth arrives through the corridor like a servant who knows the house rules. Resources come, not to rename the rooms, but to furnish them for good work. Solomon's story stands inside this corridor with us. When he asked for an understanding heart, his hand rested on the wisdom door. When he built the temple as a house for the name, his life crossed into worship with reverent detail. When prosperity flooded the courts, wealth proved to be a steward when the first 2 rooms were honored. and a seducer when the order drifted. The same cedar, the same gold, the same songs mean one thing when bowing is central and another when bowing slips into memory. The parable does not accuse, it remembers. It remembers how peace feels when order is right, and how thin the air grows when the order is wrong. Listen to the corridor's rhythm as it speaks in simple sentences that steady the hands. Wisdom before display, worship before dominance, stewardship before spectacle. The repetitions are not slogans. They are a cadence that lays tracks in the mind and calms the body, creating grooves that decisions can follow when pressure rises. Under stress, memory often loses nuance and keeps only what has been practiced. Practice the right sequence, and the right sequence practices you when the room begins to spin. There are seasons when the wealth door seems to open by itself, deals closing quicker than expected, applause rising higher than planned, influence collecting like dew. Those seasons are not traps by definition, they are tests by default. Without the previous rooms, the new room grows loud and hot and hungry. With them, the new room grows generous. Prosperity then becomes breath, not bait. The heart can give without theatrics and receive without shame. The metrics may still matter, but they stop telling the whole truth about the day. The image of 3 doors is not an argument against beauty or success. It is a map for carrying them. A map does not move your feet. It tells your feet where the ground holds. The ground holds where wisdom teaches the eyes what to love, where worship tethers love to its source, and where wealth learns to become a language of care rather than a dialect of fear. In that grammar, even loss has sentences that end with hope, and even gain has boundaries that protect the soul from the dizziness of perpetual ascent. If the corridor feels familiar, it is because every life stands in it, again and again. Not once for all, but daily, hourly, at hinge moments and in ordinary minutes. The choice is often small, almost quiet. An email written with clean motive, a meeting opened with humility rather than hunger, a promise kept when no one is looking. The doors are grand in the parable and modest in the day. The order remains the same. And over time, the nervous system learns the peace of a house that keeps to its sequence, and the spirit learns the joy of a story that doesn't need crisis to feel alive. The 3 words above the thresholds will outlast the trend of any era. Wealth will keep changing shape. Wisdom will keep sounding like clear water. Worship will keep drawing the heart toward a center that does not move. In Solomon's Rise and Fracture, the map is written with tenderness and warning. When the rooms are visited in the healing order, a life can carry gold without being carried away by it, can hold a crown without losing its first love, can bless a people long after applause turns to ordinary air. Some days begin like a chord, held softly on a cello, low and steady. Some begin like a radio stuck between stations. A simple rhythm brings the signal back. A heart that asks, a conscience that aligns, a memory that audits. It is less a plan than a posture, less a technique than a way of being present. In this rhythm, a person is not chased by the day. The day is welcomed into a center that already knows its name. The nervous system shows the shift. Breath lengthens, the chest feels more spacious, attention widens, and the spirit recognizes an older movement beneath the physiology, a return to reverence. Asking is the first movement. Not a speech, not a deal, not the performance of certainty, but a small opening of the inner hand. The line is ancient and intimate, give me a listening heart, and it works like a key in a familiar lock. The mind, which moments earlier grasped for control, softens around the possibility of guidance. The body hears it too. The jaw loosens, the shoulders settle, the pulse stops rehearsing an argument and starts keeping time with a gentler drum. In this asking, desire is not scolded, it is refined. Ambition is not erased, it is braided to love. The soul remembers that wisdom is not merely the sum of thoughts, but the marriage of truth and tenderness in the presence of God. Alignment follows like the second step of a practice gait. Values take their seats, not as decor, but as governors, the non-negotiables standing like quiet guardians at the doorway of choice. Names rise: integrity, mercy, stewardship, rest. When the day presents its contracts and corridors, these names steady the hand that reaches for the pen and the foot that feels pressure to run. Neuroscience has its rendering of this moment: the prefrontal mind regaining range, the anterior cingulate holding complexity without panic, the vagus nerve tightening the weave between breath and calm, and the spirit has its own peace that defies the math of circumstance. Auditing closes the loop without closing the heart. The sun lowers, the room finally quiets. Memory brings scenes to the table like honest friends. Where the center held, gratitude warms the chest with a clean heat. Where drift began, the truth is noted without drama. The aim is not self-punishment, it is clarity, the sort that prevents tomorrow's hurry from rewriting today's lesson. In the brain, such review reconsolidates memory so that wisdom is easier to reach next time. In the soul, it keeps humility fresh and shame far from the door. This is how character thickens in the grain, not by grand gestures, but by faithful repetitions that teach the body and the will the same song. Ask, align, audit. The cadence lands with the simplicity of breath: in, through, out. Repeated over weeks, it becomes a kind of liturgy for ordinary hours. Decision fatigue still visits, but it no longer moves in. Fear still knocks, but it no longer gets the final word. Even success changes timbre, less metallic, more human, because it is tethered to a story larger than reputation. People around such a life feel the difference without needing a memo. Meetings hold more truth in fewer words. Rooms lower their temperature faster. Apologies arrive before resentment roots. This practice carries Solomon's triad in its bloodstream: calling honored in the asking, calibration maintained in the aligning, consecration renewed in the auditing. It is the daily echo of a night in Gibeon and the steady counterweight to the drift that later cracked a crown. In seasons of plenty, it keeps worship at the center so that wealth remains a servant. In seasons of pressure, it keeps conscience awake so that strategy does not devour soul. The crown grows lighter, not because its metal changes, but because the neck beneath it is no longer bracing against the weight of pretending. Images help the heart remember. Picture a compass laid beside a lamp and a plumb line. The compass names true north. This is the asking. The lamp throws light on the path at your feet. This is the aligning. The plumb line checks the wall after the stones are set. This is the auditing. None of them is glamorous, all of them are saving. Together they keep a house square when storms are not announcing themselves, when success is not sounding alarms, when the slow creep of misalignment would otherwise go unchallenged. Over time, the rhythm becomes less a practice and more a presence that walks with you into rooms where the stakes run high. You can feel it in the body as coherence, steadier heart rhythms, quieter startle, a softness around the eyes that does not signal weakness but depth. You can hear it in your language, fewer justifications, clearer motives, kinder strength, and you can sense it in prayer, less bargaining, more trust, less performance, more nearness. Outcomes still matter, but they stop deciding your worth. Influence still grows, but it stops feeding on the breath of those you lead. The Solomon practice does not promise ease. It promises alignment. Alignment is its own consolation, because it lets a person live inside one story instead of many, one that holds together when attention is scattered, one that keeps dignity near when applause is loud, one that knows what to bless and what to release. In that story, a listening heart becomes less rare and more ordinary, like clean water in a house that once counted every drop. The day ends with enough quiet to hear the soul say what it could not say while the gears were turning. This was honest. This was good. This can be mended where it was thin, and in the soft afterlight, gratitude rises without being staged, preparing the final words not as an exit, but as a blessing. There is a quiet moment after a long story when the body knows what the mind is still arranging. Breathing steadies, shoulders soften, and the heart begins to sort light from noise. Solomon's life lingers in that space, like a constellation, some stars bright with wisdom, others dimmed by drift, all of them mapping a sky the traveler can navigate by. The pattern is clear enough to live by, without being simple enough to dismiss. Wisdom builds, compromise erodes. Calling is clarified in conflict, discernment before scale. Excellence as worship. Fractures begin with tolerated grains. Endings can still carry healing. The truest order is wisdom, then worship, then wealth. None of this arrives as pressure. It arrives as permission to live from a deeper center than urgency can reach. The nervous system appreciates this order, even when language fails. Coherence feels like warmth across the chest and space behind the eyes, like a tension that can hold both hope and fear without breaking. A life aligned with reverence gives the body fewer alarms to manage and gives the mind better data to honor. The spirit senses the same alignment from another angle, calling it peace that does not depend on perfect outcomes. In that peace, love can become patient again, truth can become gentle again, and power can become safe again because it carries someone rather than consuming them. The crown is still heavy, yet the neck beneath it no longer has to brace with pretense, and the gaze no longer scans for rescue because help is already near. The arc we have traced is not only ancient, it is personal. Some watching will find themselves near the beginning, where legitimacy feels fragile and counsel feels like oxygen. Some will recognize Gibeon's night, where the blank check is less about riches and more about becoming trustworthy with people's lives. Others may be standing in the bright courtyards of achievement, where the scent of cedar and applause mingles with a private question about drift. Some will feel the hairline crack, small enough to dismiss and large enough to keep them awake. Others will sit with the ache of division, outer or inner, wondering whether what remains can still bless. Wherever the story touches, the same truth holds. A listening heart changes the way a life carries weight. There is a tenderness in knowing that wisdom does not erase human complexity, it dignifies it. The writings that grew from Solomon's reign are proof. Proverbs for the daily street, Ecclesiastes for the honest sky, Song of Songs for love that refuses to be bought. Together they keep the soul from choosing between depth and duty, spirit and science, beauty and order. They teach rhythm more than rule, attention more than display, and they whisper the same sentence in a dozen ways until it becomes reflex. Guard the center and the edges will learn to hold. The sentence sounds theological, psychological, and practical at once because truth refuses to split itself for our convenience. Repetition has carried us on purpose. Breathe, listen, choose, ask, align, audit, wisdom, worship, wealth. The phrases are more than poetry. They are grooves cut into memory so that in loud rooms the hands still know the way home. When pressure rises, the old panic may knock, yet the door no longer swings so easily because another habit stands where fear used to stand. That habit is reverence. Reverence is not distance. It is closeness without control. It is the steady awareness that life is received, not seized, and that responsibility is holy because people are not props for our dramas, but souls with weight and wonder. The true story of King Solomon ends without varnish, and that honesty is a gift. A crown can slip, a heart can drift, a kingdom can fracture, and still, wisdom can be handed down like bread. A single sentence can save a decision. A remembered order can save a year. A daily rhythm can save a life from being slowly traded for its resume. The scrolls still speak because God still speaks, and the human heart, however crowded, still knows the sound of its own homecoming. Home is not a place without history. It is a presence within history where mercy does not cancel truth and truth does not cancel love. If a single image remains when the screen goes dark, let it be the listening heart, a quiet strength at the center of a noisy calling. Not fragile, not naive. A strength that looks at wealth and smiles when it serves. A strength that looks at power and bows before it blesses. A strength that looks at failure and finds in it the seed of counsel for those who follow. The path does not become easy because this strength is chosen. It becomes honest, and honest paths heal. That is the quiet miracle Solomon's life still offers. Not a map without storms, but a way to carry a crown through them without losing the person beneath the metal.